Hello, hello. So, I was inspired to do this short video. I don't know why I say short video. My videos often aren't very short. But with a conversation I had with someone last week, and I was talking about what it's like to not have any of the grief, to have all of those emotions kind of lifted away from you, and just not have any of whatever you might have in amongst your grief experience, the pain or anger or guilt or missing, whatever's in there, to have that not there. And the question coming up of, what does that look like? What does that mean? Almost, does that make you a bit of a sociopath? Is it that something terrible happened and you just don't feel anything about it? Or a narcissist in that, you're involved in something or there's things you feel guilty about, and again, you just have no emotion about whatever you did wrong. So yeah, and this is a big question because for most people they only have one experience of grief and can't imagine that they ever see it another way. So the idea that you would feel differently or you wouldn't have the pain, I think a lot of people, must have that idea that the story still looks exactly the same, you just don't have any feelings, which is not what it is, like not even close. So the funny thing for me is, everyone who comes to me, everyone who contacts me, everyone who signs up to my mailing list, everyone who becomes a client, is looking for relief from their pain, wants to change the way they feel. And actually, that's not really what I do. It's a byproduct of what I do. So my work is not to free you of your emotion. It's just that what happens as part of the process. What it's really about is changing the story. So you see the story one way at the moment, and if you were to describe it to someone, it would be very painful, and there's all these heartbreaking elements and the things that upset you and the things you regret and what might make you angry and all these things, and you just see it a certain way. And what I realized really early on in my own journey, when I had completely transformed my own grief, is that the first thing that happens is the story changes. And it's not a trick of the mind, it's not NLP, it's not that you just release so much emotion and release the emotion until it's gone. It's that the story changes, and the story changes because you don't see the full story right now. So, think of an easier example, because I know it can be really big to get your head around that around death, because you think you see it. You think you know all there is to know about it. You think you see the clear picture. But, imagine you meet someone and you have a really bad first impression of them. You really don't like them. And then further down the line, actually I have a friend of mine, an old friend of mine like this in London, and when we met, we really clashed. We really clashed as two women in a group of people, and we were quite different energies, and we really clashed, and we pretended we were friends and we weren't, and down the line when we got to know each other, we were able to be honest about that. We became really good friends, and we learned to understand each other differently. But at the start of it, and at the start, if you've met someone you just don't like, and I know this sounds like it doesn't relate to grief, but bear with me, it's just that it's an easier example to get your head around. You kind of then get to know someone and you realize that you didn't realize everything about them, or that the day you met them, their dog had died that morning, or their partner had just left them, they were just having a crappy day. Or you said something that really pushed a button in them that you didn't know they had, or they did something that really rubbed you up the wrong way. And then you find out some more information and go, oh God, that's not what I thought at all. Like, I just completely misread them, or I didn't have all the info. And when you have more info, you feel differently about them. And that's what happens with grief. So we are very encouraged in our society to see grief, to see death as just negative. And everything that's happened is negative, and everything that's happened is sad, and here's how it should have been, but here's how it went instead. And here's how ill they were, and suffering and pain is terrible, and everybody should avoid it. And we weren't there for the death, and we should have all been. And, it's this whole picture, it just looks one way. So in my work, it's about, there's a lot more there than you've looked at. There's, your own beliefs that are a massive part of where you're at, your own beliefs around grief, around what it is, what you're meant to do with it, what's that meant to look like in your life, what it means, your own relationship to this person, your relationship to death, and just how you think things should have gone. What you get into examining all that, you start to look at the different dynamics, you start to undo and unravel. It's like this ball of grief. You start to unravel it and look at what it all is, pull it apart, see the elements of the story you haven't seen, and the story changes. The story changes. It's like you fill in all these gaps, you get information that you didn't realize you had, and the entire story changes. And that is when the feelings completely change. Just like when you've met someone and you're like, hate that dickhead, really don't like that person, and then you get to know them, you fill in the gaps, and you have a different story and you feel differently. It's not that you've had to actively sit down and work on your feelings or try and release them or do your meditation or whatever it is. It's that when the story shifts, the feelings shift completely. So that's what it is. It's not, I often say if I could just run around with a magic wand and tap people on the head and have them feel completely differently, I would love to do that. It's a pity it doesn't work like that, unfortunately. But that's not what it's about. It's not because I just wish I could just release all those emotions. It's that you change the story when you see the full picture that you haven't seen, and the story as you've seen it, and their life and their death and your part in that all, and the grief in your life. When the story around all that completely transforms so that it makes sense and it's beautiful and it's meaningful and you wouldn't change any of it, then the emotion completely dissipates. And from that space, you're left in a place where there's just love for them. Just love for them. Just honor for their entire life, including their death. Just connection whenever you want to reach for it. Everything that is currently hidden under all this, the difficult emotion, the negative emotion that clouds that love, that clouds that connection. Yeah, so if you've ever read my work or listened to me and wondered if that's what it's about, it's just getting rid of the emotion somehow and feeling nothing about the same story that you imagine can only be a painful one, then no, that's not the answer. It's about we transform the story. And it's not a trick in transforming the story. This isn't not tricking your brain into thinking something that's not real. We're not planting false memories, or I don't even know how to do such a thing. But it is about going 360 around the whole death, seeing everything you haven't seen. And from that place, when all the pieces of the puzzle are put together beautifully, how different that picture looks. And that's what changes your experience. Not me. It's your changing of the story, your honoring of the whole story that completely changes it. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense about where I'm coming from and about where you need to be working on. All the emotional release in the world is not going to heal you. It's good to let it out. You don't want to hold it in your body. It's not healthy, but you ain't going to heal. You ain't going to heal. You can go to grief groups, you can go to counseling, you can write your journal until you are blue in the face and do that for the rest of your life. But unless that story changes, you're never going to get that healing. So while it's important to get the emotion out, it's working on your story. It's working around some different questions and understanding this death in your life in a different way that will heal you. All right, lots of love to you and talk soon.